Okay then, so this is the API Gateway and Lambda integration. In that small project, we will be designing and actually implementing the API Gateway and Lambda integration. This is the architectural diagram in which the user invokes the API in the API Gateway, and the API Gateway then in turn calls the Lambda function, that is the backend, and this Lambda function does all the computation and sends the response back to the API Gateway and in turn back to the users. Okay, so moving forward, we will be creating first the get method and then the post method. So for the get method, we will be building a function, Lambda function, and if you can see, I have actually already built that. It's just a simple Lambda function. I have given the name API Lambda function, and for the code, it's just a simple hello world code. Hey there, welcome, and nothing fancy here. And let's go to the API gateway now, and in the API gateway we will be building a REST API. So we are in the API gateway, and we will be building a new API called, let's give a name, it's API Lambda. Description, let's keep it the same. Okay, create API. Now it has the API is created. Now let's move on. We have to create a resource here. Let's give it a resource name. Let's go with the API Lambda. API Lambda. API Lambda FN. Okay, now moving on, create resource. So in this resource we will be creating a method, that is the get method. Get method, check mark. Okay, now it is asking for the integration type. As we have integrated the Lambda function, we want to integrate this Lambda function with the API here, API gateway. Okay, so Lambda function is selected. We will be typing the name here, and you can see it is appeared here, API Lambda function. Save now. You're about to give API gateway permissions to invoke your Lambda functions. Yes, we have to give the permissions, so it will create permissions on our behalf. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Let's test it out. Let's see if it works. Test. And yes, as expected, hey there, welcome, we have received this response back from the Lambda function. Okay, now we have to deploy this API. See, we can deploy here, API actions deploy stage, new stage, stage name, let's call this dev. Let's also call this development, and let's keep the deployment description as same, deployment development. Okay, deploy. Okay, now we go into the dev stage and our get, which we deployed on, and if I click here, control click in a new tab, and we can see, hey there, welcome, we can receive. So this shows that our response is working. Our API gateway is working, our Lambda function is giving us response. And let's, one thing I have to show here, that as I have linked this API gateway to this Lambda function, if I refresh this page, it will have a trigger here. Let me show you. So you can see the API gateway is a trigger to this Lambda function. Okay, so now we will be creating the post method for the Lambda function. Now, as we have created the Lambda function, let me show you the code. This is the Lambda function that we created, and now we will create the API in the API gateway for the post. Let's go to the REST API, and we will create a new API. Let's give it a name of API Lambda post, and for simplicity let's keep it the description as the same. Create API. Okay, now we will create a resource first, and let's call it API post. We will create a new resource and we will call it API post. Let's create the resource, and now we will create a method under this resource which will be post. Check mark. Okay, now we have to integrate the Lambda. Lambda is selected. The name of the function is Lambda API post, and we'll save this. We are giving API gateway permission to invoke Lambda function. Yes. Okay. And now we have to test it out. Test. We go down and curly braces, double quotes, name. We provide, let me give me my name, Norman, and let's test it out and let's see. Yes, it's giving us the response that is expected. Hi there, Norman. Okay, so now that we have tested out, it's working fine. Now let's deploy this API. Deployment stage, let's create a new stage. Stage name, yes, development. Keep it same, or you can deploy. Okay, now dev post. Now this is the URL that we have to invoke. Now to test it out, let me bring Postman here, and in the Postman copy this URL and paste it here. Okay, now in the body I have selected JSON, and in the JSON I have selected raw, and curly braces I provide the name and my name, Norman. Okay, so let's send it out. Sending request. Okay, so we get the 200 response error. It is okay, and it is giving us hi there, Norman. Let me just test it out with a different name now. My last name Munir, my surname, and let's send this out. Let's see. Yes, it's giving us the required response.